Hello everybody, this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. And what we were discussing about the topics from your biology course for the class 11 and 12 under the program IIT PAL. And in this series, we were discussing about the different applications of the biotechnology, whether it is for the medical field or the diagnostics or the agricultures. And what we were discussing in the previous lecture, we were discussing about the transgenic animals and how you can be able to produce the transgenic animals. And while we were discussing about the different types of transgenic animals, like transgenic mouse, transgenic rabbits, transgenic pigs, and then ultimately we have also discussed about their applications in the different types of fields and how the transgenic animals are helping to develop the different types of disease model, so that you can be able to understand the disease mechanism, as well as we can also understand the physiological aspects related to a particular process, or we can be able to use these disease model for the screening of the different types of compounds, so that we can be able to discover the cure for these diseases. And at the end we also discussed that there are many dangers what is associated by developing the transgenic animals, and because of that the transgenic animals are not being accepted into the society, and there are very much always there is a apprehensions about the whether we should use the transgenic animals or not, because these are not the naturally occurring animals. So there's always a concern from the society side, and there's it's not a acceptance. And now today's lecture we will discuss about something which is very related to this aspect, where why the people are not accepting the transgenic animals, because they are having a fear, because they are having a concern about the health and the other aspects. So all these aspects are always being covered under a topic which is called as the ethical issues. So what is mean by the ethical issues? Ethical issues are the concern or the parameters through which the person is actually trying to utilize these genetically modified organisms, or the GM crops, or the other kinds of biotechnology related products. So what is mean by the ethical issues? So ethical issues are, or the ethics are actually the act of defining what is morally right or the wrong, which means whether you can be able to, or whether you will be allowed to develop a transgenic plants or animals or any other such kind of products utilizing the biotechnology. And what is correct and what is wrong is actually depends on to the several aspects and several parameters, and that's how the ethics is something which is very very relative. What is correct for me, what is right for me, may not be right for you, and that's how there is always a discussion about what is right and what is wrong. And that's how there are many parameters what people have designed, and what are the different parameters people have conceptualized, so that you can be able to decide what is correct or what is wrong. It also assesses the reasoning behind our decision, which means suppose you want to develop a transgenic mouse, whether that decision is correct or the wrong, and what could be the concept and the principle that are being employed to justify our moral choices and the action, which means what on what concept and principle, and what is the reasoning behind through which you have actually developed a particular type of transgenic animals or the crop. This is more important in terms of the biotechnology, because biotechnology has enormous applications and enormous potentials to develop many types of products, and also has the ability to change the environmental conditions. So that's how the people are having a very serious concern about, or serious ethical concern related to different types of applications of the biotechnology, whether, because all these applications are associated with the human health, they are associated with the food, and ultimately they are also associated with the environment. Because you can imagine that if I am developing a transgenic rabbit, or if I am developing a transgenic pig, that is actually going to affect at the end, that is actually going to affect the environment and also as well as the human health. And that's why it is very important to understand what is the ethical issues, and how we can be able to decide whether a particular type of product or particular type of action is essential for the service of the humankind. Now, the first question, and so because the ethical issues are of are taking care of the different aspects, and that's how the ethical issues are also associated with the different aspects related to the human life, whether it is related to the legal issues. So legal issues comes when you are actually trying to develop a product, and then you are trying to take a patent so that you can be able to make the money out of that. And then in that case, what you do is you take that product and make a patent, and then you restrict the others to use that product. And because of that, it actually has some kind of legal issues where you actually not allowing the others to use that. So that actually is also ethical issues, whether you are permitted to to restrict someone to use that particular type of product. For example, if I am trying to develop the transgenic rice, for example, so will I be only the whole sole person who's going to cultivate this particular rice, or whether I should be allowed the other to use that? That comes under the legal issues. Then you also have the food concern. For example, the ethical issues are also related to the food aspects, where you are actually going whether that particular type of product is allowed to to grow the food products, or whether that kind of product is, or that kind of ingredient is good to utilize into the food preparations. Then ethical issues also comes when it comes to the medicine, because whether the particular type of product from the transgenic animals or the crop is good to be utilized in the form of medicines. Because as you might have recall that when we were discussing about the transgenic animals like pig or rabbit or mouse, what we were saying is that the pig is a very good source for the organ transplant. So whether or it be, or some of the organisms are also very good in terms of producing the insulin as well as other kinds of the medicinally important products like the interferon gamma and all other kinds of medicines. So whether we can actually be able to utilize that for this particular type of purpose, and whether there will be any concern related to that. And then the ethical concerns are also associated with the poor countries like and the developing countries, so that whether a restriction when you are trying to take a patent on a particular type of product, whether that is actually going to deprive the developed country as well as the poor country from earning the money, and as well as from earning the food crops. And ultimately it is also actually going to take care of the different aspects related to the environment. Because when you are trying to develop a new species, a new transgenic animals, or the new transgenic crops, or new transgenic insects, it is not going to limited to a particular region, because it is actually going to spread within the environment. And once it is going into the environment, it is actually going to crossbreed with the other species. And then that's how the transgene what you have put into that particular transgenic insect may be having a chance to spread to the other species, and that's how it is actually going to contaminate the environment. So these are the multiple aspects where the ethical issues are very related to biotechnology. But the first question comes, why we are actually be concerned about the ethical issues. And even if they are concerned about the ethical issues, why there is a need to take the risk, which means why there is a need to develop transgenic animals, and why there is a risk that by developing a transgenic animals, it is actually going to be correct or wrong. So there should be a balance between the possible gain as well as the possible harm, because when you are developing a transgenic animals, you are developing or the crop, you are developing that because you want to gain the something. Like for example, if I am developing the abiotic stress resistance or insect resistance crop plant, I am trying to do that because I want to increase my plant productivity. But it is also having the possible harm, because it might be affecting the environment, it might be affecting the the some of the ecological parameters. So that's why there should be a balance between the possible gain versus the possible harms. For example, profit to be made or life saved through the greater production versus the cost or the harm of things that went wrong, which means you might have to see the profit what you are going to get by, because if you are going to increase the productivity, you are actually going to make the food available for many number of more number of people. But will that be allowed on the cost of harm of things that will going to went wrong? For example, if you are releasing a transgenic crops into the fields, and if that will actually going to do go for the cross pollinations or cross fertilization for the neighboring crops, and it is that's how it the transgene what you are putting into that particular crop may actually go into the wild type species, will that is actually going to do some kind of harms, or whether these product what you are getting from the transgenic animals are or the transgenic crops are actually having some side kind of side effects onto the human health as well. So that's why the decisions whether you take this particular type of risk depends on to the what are the balance between the benefits as well as the harm. And so the moral character on the genetically modified organisms view to seen be comparison with the other kinds of danger, and that's how you might have to consider the different types of risk before and different types of ethical issues. But why there is a need to take the risk? There is a need to take a risk because there is a and that I will explain you with the help of a particular type of example. For example, we have a problem of food security, which means we don't have the food for everybody, because many of the poor countries as well as the developing countries do not have the sufficient quantity of food for the all the people. So what we have to do, there was a one option that the green revolution was happening in India as well as the other countries, but that green revolution was not enough to make the enough amount of food, and that's why it was not been able to eradicate the poverty. So what is the solution? The solution is that you increase the food production in developed countries for exports at a price that is poor can afford, and thus the purchasing power, which means you have to use the transgenic crops and other kinds of solutions so that you can be able to increase the food productions. And once you have the enough food productions, you can be able to export that food to the more poor people, and for so that they can be able to afford this particular product. Then you have the limiting resources for the food production, because there is a limitation of the land as well as the water. So there is a limitation in terms of the variety of the particular type of food plant, so the green revolution is not adequate. And on the other hand, there is a limitation of that you don't have the adequate amount of land as well as the water. What is the solution to this? You increase the yield on the available land using the biotechnology. So if you want to go with these kind of solutions, you might have to take the risk, because you are now going to use these transgenic crops, you are going to use the genetically modified crops, and that's how you are actually going to encounter different types of side products and different types of problems. And that's how the ethical issues are going to be considered, whether the profit what you are getting versus the problem what you are going to face by employing that kind of thing into the into your system is beneficial or the harmful, because the net result has to be taken into consideration to decide whether I should go ahead with the transgenic particular type of transgenic animals or the GM crops, or whether I should should not do that. So when you want to do a better crop plants, the advances in the biotechnology now allows the production of plants with the novel traits such as the longer shelf lives, increased nutrient content, and the drought resistance. And that is the way it's actually helping to increase the productivity. And the advent of genetically modified crop provided new opportunity for increasing the agricultural production and feeding the world. And that's how it's actually good to use the biotechnology for the better crop productions and the better crop plants. But as I said, it is also associated with some of these side effects and the different types of concern what is being raised. So what is the benefit of the genetically modified crops? The genetically modified crop, the genetic engineering can be used to remove the genes associated with the allergies. For example, gene that can produce the allergic proteins in peanut can be blocked. So one of the advantage of having a GM crop is that it is actually going to take care of the allergies. For example, in the case of peanut, which is actually having some people have the peanut allergy for the peanut products, you can actually have the gene that will actually going to suppress the production of these allergic proteins. Then you can have the some of the genes which in the crop which such as rice and wheat to enhance its nutritional value. For example, the golden rice, which is actually producing the some of the vitamins and all other kinds of nutrients. Then you can have the genetic modification can be used to produce a healthier product, for example, eliminating the trans fat or the caffeine. Then the GM crop can be used to induce herbicide resistance, leading to the decreased use of the herbicide. And so this is actually a beneficial aspect where you are cutting down onto the use of the herbicides, because herbicide is very carcinogenic. So if you are using, and it is also causing the, or it is also reducing the productivity of the particular type of lands. So it is because it is affecting the not only the the growth of the herbs into the particular crop, but it also affecting the productivity of that particular land. Then you have the induction of insects and pest resistance, and that will actually also be beneficial because it is going to decrease the use of insecticide as well as the pesticide. And then you can also have the genetically modified crop, which actually going to have the abiotic stress resistance. Now, what is the ethical concern with the GM crops? So you have the two aspects, and I have given you a side-by-side comparison. So these are the positive aspects. So I think if you can see that so far we have discussed a very good thing about the GM crops. Like what we have discussed that if you have the GM crops, it is actually going to allow you to use the less amount of herbicides. It is also going to allow you to use the less amount of insecticides and all other kinds of products, which actually ultimately affects the human health, because all these products get into the plant and then they actually get into the food chain actually. So these are the positive aspects. Like there is a need to raise the agricultural productivity to deal with the problem of the poverty and the food insecurity. And how you can do that? You can do that simply by genetic engineering allows the production of plant with the desired trait with a speedily and a low cost. So that is very important, because if you use the genetic engineering, you can be able to use that to produce a particular type of plant with the desirable traits. These are the positive aspects, and because of that, you can be able to deal with the problem of poverty as well as the food insecurity. For example, you can see this is the genetically modified or the GM watermelon, and whereas these are the GM different types of fruits. But what is the negative aspect? The negative aspect, one of the major negative aspect is that the unnaturalness. The GM crops are associated with a sense of unnaturalness because these are not the crops what is naturally available in the society, in the system, because these are being developed by incorporating an extra gene into the particular type of plant. So it is wrong to wrong in itself to alter the essence of a species or to interfere with the natural order, which means it is actually affecting in terms of that it does not give you a sense that it is actually a natural product. So people think that it is a unnatural product, and because of that, the product what is coming from the GM crops does not have the social acceptance. And then you have the environmental risk. So gene can flow from the modified plant to the wild plant, leading to the potential threats in terms of the biodiversity. So you know that the wild plants, although they are bad in terms of the food production, although they are bad in terms of many of the traits, but they may be very good and they may be carrying some of the traits which is essential for many type of aspects. And at the end, since the wild plants are well acclimatized to that particular environment, you require a wild plant to be there so that you can be able to utilize that additional properties. And so if there will be a contamination of the gene from the transgenic or GM crops or the transgenic plants to the wild plant, you are actually going to ultimately, you at the end, you are going to reduce the biodiversity, which means you are actually going to affect the availability of these wild plant. Because if there will be a contamination, there will be no wild plant, there will be no pure wild plant present in the environment, and that's how you are actually going to lose a particular type of species. And then you have the health risk. Because of the possible harmful health effects of GM foods, the GM food should be properly labeled to allow people to choose whether to consume or not to consume the GM foods. So the health risk is a very, very big concern and a negative aspect associated with the GM crops. Let's see some more of the health risk associated with the GM crops. So these are the some of the additional health risks, like for example, the toxin and the engineered gene associated with G food may enter the human circulatory system, causing the disruption in the biological event. So one of the major concern is that the toxin as well as the engineered gene, what you are putting into the GM crop, because once ultimately it will end up into the particular type of fruits or the food grains, it will enter into the human circulatory system, and because these are the toxin as well as the engineered gene, they may actually cause the disruption in terms of the into the basic metabolic pathway or the basic metabolism of the into the human, and that's how it may actually end up in causing the different types of disease. GM foods may also be linked to the gluten disorder. So these are also different types of disease which can also be caused by the GM foods. A research carried out in 2002 showed that the GM corn are linked to the rat tumors, which means if you, so there is a research which is carried out in 2002 2012, which shows that if you feed the GM corn to a rat, it actually develops the tumor in their so these rats develop the tumors, which means the GM crops might be giving some additional toxin or additional factors which are actually stimulating the tumor formations. The GM food may also be linked to the human breast cancer cell growth or the thyroid issues and the infertility. And so that is also evident from the in the human trials also, that where the GM crops are found to be associated with the human breast cancer growth as well as the thyroid issues, which means it can also cause the hypothyroidism or the hyperthyroidism and the infertility. The glyphosate, the present in the GM crops, are known to be cause malfunctioning and the birth defect at the very very high doses, which means the glyphosate is a herbicide, and so it is if it is present in the GM foods, uh, that actually cause the malfunctioning as well as the birth defect at a very high dose. Uh, on the other hand, glyphosate is also linked to the weight gain, depression, as well as the Alzheimer disease. So these are the health risks of the GM crops. So what we have understood is that even if you are producing a GM crop, there are multiple positive aspects, there are multiple negative aspects, and you have to take a proper decision in terms of the net result, like whether the crop, whether the positives are more or the negatives are more, and that you always have to do simply by going with the ethical issues and considering all these kinds of aspects. Apart from the GM crops, the genetically modified organisms are also playing an important role in the medicines and research. So GMOs are emerged as one of the mainstay of the biomedical research. For example, the GM is used in the for example, GMOs are being used to produce the insulin and other kinds of biologically relevant products. But ethical issues are also there in terms of the GMOs as medicines and research, which includes that the violation of natural organism intrinsic values, which means if you are producing a GM crops, you are actually destroying the natural organism because it is losing its intrinsic values. Then you are tampering with the nature by mixing the gene among the species, because you know that there is no species or there is no species available where the human proteins are being expressed into the E. coli. But now what you are doing is you are generating a genetically modified E. coli which actually harbors the genes from the humans, and that actually is a kind of a tampering or contamination of the nature by mixing the gene from the from the distant species. And then there is an objection to consuming animal genes in a plant because of the animal rights, which means if you are producing the animal genes into the plant, you are actually depriving the animals, because ultimately you are not going to cultivate these animals for the particular type of product, because now what you have done is you have taken a gene and put it into the plant. So now what you're going to do is you're going to consume the plant. Because of this, you might not prefer to grow these animals. So ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to sacrifice, or you're going to you know discard these animals, because you already have produced these genes into the plants. And that is a very very big objections when you are using the GMOs as a source for medicine as well as for the research. The GMOs are also very much available for the pharmaceutical products, like products of the complex pharmaceutical, by enabling the generation of safer and cheaper vaccines and therapeutics. A classical example is insulin, which are derived from the pig and cow. But it also has a concern, because if you are deriving the insulin from the pig as well as the cow, there is a serious concern that the animal may suffer as a result of being genetically modified. So what is the and then there is a religious problem. For example, some religions like Jew and the Hindus prohibited the use of insulin derived from the animal sources like the pig as well as the cows. So what is the solution? The solution is that you can use the GM microbes like E. coli, and which is less likely to cause the allergic reactions. Yet you can use genetic engineering in the production of medicine. Through many people are benefited with none harmed. Then you also can use the gene therapy. So there are things which you can do in terms of manipulating a genome of a particular human being or particular organisms, and that approach is called as a gene therapy. So there are multiple positive aspects like the gene therapy. Gene therapy is becoming a treatment option for diseases ranging from the rare metabolic disorder to cancer. So introduction of these GM cell into the patient could cure the disease without the need for a matched donor. So that is a positive aspect, that you can actually develop the transgenic cells, and then you can just put these transgenic cells in, and then that will take care of the normal physiology, as well as that will take care of to correct the different types of disorders, whether these are the metabolic disorder or to the cancer. For example, people are trying to develop the genetically modified T cells, and these T cells are being trained to kill the cancer cells, and that's how you can be able to use these T cells. So you can infuse these T cells into a patient, and once these T cells will go inside the body, they are actually going to cure the cancer. What is the negative aspects? Negative aspect is that Harvard gene therapy has been a controversial subject in the past year, that there are ethical issues like cells used for the study are often taken from the human embryo, which means you are actually, although these are the human embryos which are being donated by the women's, but these embryos are live, so they are actually could have developed into a baby, or they could have been developed into a human being. But because you require these cells, you have terminated the pregnancy, and that's how you have taken these embryos. Or there was a termination of the pregnancy, and that's how you have taken out these embryos. But you have not grown them to a baby, but you have, instead of, you taken out the cells. That technique will not be accomplished for the intended use purpose, and the replacement tissue will never be grow from a person's own stem cells. So these are the ethical region. Because of that, you are, you are have to take the intelligent decision whether I should go with the gene therapy. Because if you are not going to use the embryos, then the only option left is that you can use the stem cell from the own person. But that strategy are still under development, because where you can actually take the stem cell from a person and then try to develop the genetically modified or the transgenic cells, and then you can put them back into the particular patients. Apart from that, there are ethical concerns related to the animal rights. So, concern in ethics when discussing animal is their capacity to suffer or feel pain. This concern is weaker for the G1 mosquitoes. Concern that we are manipulating life for human purposes without considering the interest of the animal. Like, this is a very, very serious concern as far as, or the ethical concern, that you are manipulating all the animals, and that all you are doing because you want to make the products for the human benefits. But what you are not considering is that what is the interest of the animal, what whether a particular rabbit is interested to produce a particular human protein or not. That kind of concern you are not considering. And on the other hand, lastly, the biodiversity is a very, very big problem, because if you are trying to develop the newer and newer species, you might be neglecting the wild type species, and that's how it could be possible that there will be no wild type species left into the biodiversity and into the environment, and that's how it is actually you are going to lose the species. Then we are there are ethical issues in terms of the treatments and other kinds of procedures when you're talking about disease preventions. For example, you have new approaches for the preventing, diagnosis, treatment, and controlling the infectious diseases that cause the loss of human beings. Methods used to achieve these goals include the extent to which the risk to the human health, damage to the environment, and the other living organisms. Uh, for example, so there are social concerns related to the GMs into the medicine as well as the research. For example, if the blending of the animal and human DNA results in a chimeric entities possessing the degree of intelligence or sentiments never seen before in animal, should these entity be given rights and special protection? Which means if you are trying to mix the animal as well as the human DNA and trying to develop a chimeric species where you are actually going to have some sense of intelligence as well as the sentiments, then will these be given some rights and special protections? Then you have the unintended personal, social, and cultural consequences which could result from this particular type of activities. And because there are social concern, the government of India has set up an organization which is called as GEAC, like Genetic Engineering Approval Committee. And this GEAC is a committee which actually makes the decisions whether a particular type of GM research or the GM product is good for the public service or not. Because ultimately it is a personal decision. It cannot be a personal decision that whether I should use a GM crop or not, because ultimately it is a authority or the committee that should decide, and they will actually going to assess, because they are going to be there could be experts in that particular type of committee, and which is actually going to assess many aspects. It's not only going to assess the positive aspects, like there will be an increase in productivity and all that. It is also going to assess the negative aspects, like whether it is how much it is going to affect the environment, how much it is going to affect the biodiversity, how much it is going to affect the human health and all that. And depending on all these aspects, then they will actually going to allow whether the GM crops can be used into the for the human service or the public service or not. So this is all about the ethical issues what is associated when you are trying to develop the genetically modified organisms, and you would like to try to use them for different types of applications in related to biotechnology, whether it is in the medicines or pharmacy, or whether it is for the agricultures and so on. One of the major aspect related to this ethical issue is that where people are trying to take the patent of these genetically modified crops or genetically modified organism, and then they are trying to use that as a weapon to make the money out of that, and that is actually going to be covered into the next topic, and that next topic is called as the biopiracy. But before getting into the details related to the biopiracy, let's discuss about the what is mean by the patents. So what is mean by the patent, or what is mean by the patenting the traditional knowledge? So developed countries are what is developed countries are exploiting the developing countries genetic resources and the indigenous communities traditional knowledge in the name of patent on the inventions derived from those genetic resources and the traditional knowledge. So biopiracy is associated with an aspect where the developed countries like USA or Europe or all those kinds of developed countries are exploiting the genetic resources as well as the traditional knowledge which is available with the communities in the developing countries by taking a patent on the invention derived from these genetic resources as well as the traditional knowledge. This led to the biopiracy, where the exploitation of genetic resources as well as the traditional knowledge, the patentee does not give any authorization or the compensation to the country from where it has exploited the genetic resources and the indigenous community traditional knowledge. So what is the problem is that you are actually trying to use the knowledge as well as you are trying to use the genetic resources, but you are not, and then you are trying to patent that in terms of some particular type of product or some kind of sellable products, but at the end you are not giving any type of compensation to the particular type of community or particular type of country. So ultimately what is happening is that the wealth is belonging to this particular type of country, but the person who has actually taken the full rights, or the person who has taken the patent on these inventions or the patents on these particular type of inventions, from where the information as well as the resources are being taken up just simply from these developing countries, are not getting anything. So what is mean by the patenting? What is mean by the patenting is that the exclusive right granted by a government to an inventor to manufacture, use, or sell an invention for a certain number of years, which means if I got a patent about a particular type of product, or if I have developed a particular type of product, and if I got the patent, then I can manufacture that, I can use that, I can allow others to use or sell, but a particular type of share will come to the parent company, which means if I have got the patent, I will be the whole sole owner of that particular type of product, and then I will be the person who is going to decide whether the others can use that or not. And that is actually a problem which actually led to the problem of the biopiracy, which means you are not allowed to patent the natural resources like the genetic resources or the natural resources or the indigenous community traditional knowledge. But what you are going to do is you are just taking a advantage of being more developed. So what you are doing is you are just taking a genetic resources, you are taking a knowledge, and then you are trying to develop some product, and that product, for that particular type of product, you are taking a patent, and that's how you are actually depriving these people who are actually be the owner of that particular type of knowledge or the genetic resource from accessing these particular type of product, and as well as to utilize it for their own benefits. So biopiracy, as the name suggests, is it can be defined as unauthorized or uncompensated. So uncompensated is a very appropriate word. Appropriation and the commercial exploitation of genetic resources in developing countries, or the traditional knowledge of the indigenous community by corporations, mostly from the developed countries, which seek then monopoly control, which means they will going to have the wholesale control, usually patents over these resources or invention derived from these resources. What is meant by the traditional knowledge is that the knowledge which you have from your elders, and the traditional knowledge refers to the indigenous communities comprising knowledge, innovations, and practice of indigenous local communities embodying the traditional lifestyle. One of the classical example is that, for example, you have the knee, right? So if there is a, if you got some injury, or if you got some kind of so what your mother will say is that you take the neem bark and you just make a paste and put it onto your wound, and that is actually going to heal. So this aspect is called as the traditional knowledge, although we may not be knowing that what is the product present in that particular neem, or whatever the product is present in the turmeric, and whatever the products are coming present in the the tulsi leaves. For example, if you remember, in India we always take the tea in the during the winters in the night, in the with the tulsi and all other kinds of herbs. But so tea, and you know that these by consuming the tulsi and all other herbs, you can be get protected from the cough and cold and all other flu-like diseases. So that information is called as the traditional knowledge. So this information, if you know, and that information, if you give it to the company, what they will do is they are going to develop a product out of this particular type of knowledge, and then they will say that you are not going to be allowed to use the tulsi or all other kinds of product for developing your own product, and that is what is called as the biopiracy. And biopiracy is a very serious concern related to the because it is related to the exploitation of the traditional knowledge. So that's all. The traditional knowledge is based on the experience, and it is usually passed on the through generation, which means whatever just now we discussed, that we know, or that your mother knows, because your mother's mother might have told him that this is the this is the information. Then that's how it is actually going to be passed on from several generation. That if you take the tulsi, you that tulsi has some products or the compound which is actually going to protect you from the cold and the flu. Now let us understand the root cause of the problem. Now that we can take up by understanding this. For example, an inventor claimed that the intellectual property right over a particular product, usually by taking patent, that product that protects their product by allowing the inventor to prevent other people from making, using, or selling the product without permission. So this is fine. So inventor applied for a patent from a government of the territories over which he want to assess his right to prevent other from using his invention. To apply for an international patent that will apply in as many countries as the inventor choose. This is all perfectly right, which means if you have discovered something new and you want others to use that with your permission, then what you do is you are just applying for a patent to the government or the multiple governments if you want to go for an international patent, and then you are not you are asking others to use it with your permission, which means you are actually going to give the right to many people, and that's how you are going to allow them to use that. The problem arises when the product is based on a plant or animal whose unique properties are the result of years of breeding by the farmers whose investment and work is unacknowledged and unrewarded, stolen. In fact, in these cases, the patent holders have failed to obtain the farmer's permission. For example, if you are trying to utilize the turmeric, for example. So turmeric is being cultivated by the farmers, and the many type of so these farmers are knowing all these properties, and they might have developed a, a database or the information system for that. But when you are taking this patent, and when you're trying to develop a product out of this turmeric, you are neither acknowledging the efforts or the efforts by of these farmers, and neither giving them any kind of reward, which means you are not sharing your money with these guys. And that is the main problem of the biopiracy. Let's take an example, and with this example, you will understand what is mean by the biopiracy. For example, the neem. Neem is a endogenous plant, what is very what is found in the India and the Asian subcontinent, and that's how you'll see that it's in terms of the botanical name also. The botanical name of the neem is Azadirachta indica. Indica means the plant which is available in the Indian subcontinent. This means the neem is not very available in other countries, and neem is more been grown in India. Now you know that the neem act as an antibacterial, antiparasitic, antifungal, antiprotozoal, and antiviral, thus helps in protection from all the microorganisms which are always ready to invade in our body, causing the serious ailments. So this is what we know, and this is what is called as a traditional knowledge, that a neem is actually protecting us from the multiple types of infectious diseases. So the neem tree is indigenous to the Indian subcontinent and the part of South and South Asia, which means if you are so this is a traditional knowledge, and this is a traditional plant what is available in the Indian subcontinent. But what happened in 1994, the multinational corporation W.R. Grace and the US Department of Agriculture was granted a patent by the EPO covering a species method for controlling fungi on plant by the aid of a hydrophobic extracted neem oil that is diluted with a certain percentage of water. So what happened is in 1994, the multinational corporation W.R. Grace and the US Department of Agriculture was granted a patent saying that if you take the neem oil and you dilute it with the water, it is going to be a very good fungicide for the plants. That information was already available with the Indian people, because that is a traditional knowledge available or present with the, and because of that, the the Indian government actually opposed this particular type of plant, this particular type of patent, right? So, and member of the European Parliament of the Green Party, joined by the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Natural Resources from India and the International Federation of the Organic Organization based in Germany, filed an opposition of this patent. Why they have opposed this patent? Because the because of the possibility that this information what they were using, like they were using the oil mixed with the water, and they were using that as a fungicide. So already we know that it is an antifungal, right? So that information is already available. So what is the new thing what they were doing? They were not doing anything new. And that's how the opposition claimed that the fungicidal effect of hydrophobic extract of neem seed was known and used for centuries on a broader scale in India, both in traditional medicine to fight the human skin fungi and in agriculture to protect the crop. So this information was already available. So there is nothing new what is they were claiming in their patent, and that's how the opponent also claimed that the invention lacked the two major patentability requirement, like the novelty as well as the inventive steps. And that's how the EPO withdraw the patent granted grant in 2000, finding it lacked novelty. And that's how the neem, the patent, what they were trying to take, so that once they got the patent, and you can imagine that if they could have got the patent, they could have stopped the Indian companies to utilize the neem as well as the neem based products, because they will say that this is the aspect in which we already have a patent and you cannot be able to use that. And if you want to use, you have to take a permission. And what is mean by taking a permission is that you have to give them some money about that. Now let's go to the next example. The next example is the turmeric. So turmeric, the botanical name is Curcuma longa. So in Ayurvedic medicine, the turmeric has been used to aid the digestion and the liver function, the relieve arthritis pain, and regulate the menstruations. Turmeric has also been applied directly to the skin for eczema and wound healing. Today, turmeric is used for conditions such as heartburn, stomach ulcers, and the gallstone. It is also used to reduce the inflammation as well as to prevent and treat the cancers. So these are the information is already been available, and all these information is available because there is a traditional knowledge available with the turmeric. Now, what happened in 1995, the USPTO granted two Indian nationals at the University of Mississippi for a method of promoting healing of a wound in a patient by administering a wound healing agent consisting of an effective amount of turmeric powder. The patent applied recognized the traditional use of turmeric in India but claimed that they had been first who administered, which means in 1995, the two Indian people from the University of Mississippi said that they have actually applied a turmeric powder into to the wound of a particular patient, and that's how it has actually healed the wound. So they want to apply the patent so that this aspect of the turmeric powder can be reserved for their own usage. This patent was challenged by the Indian Council for Scientific and Research, which is CSIR, in 1996 on the ground of prior arts, right? In the re-examination process, the CSR claimed that the turmeric has been used for thousands of years for healing wounds and rashes, and therefore its medicinal use was not novel, which means nothing is what something novel what they were claiming, because this is what we were doing in from centuries. And ultimately, the USPTO, the US Patent Authority, upheld these objections and revoked the patents in the April 1998, and it is based on its decision on the ground of lacking novelty and obviousness of the inventions. So this is what is being happened with the all the traditional knowledge what is present in the developing countries, whether it and so that's how the people are trying to steal the traditional knowledge and trying to develop the new product based on that. Now, the third example is the basmati rice. So, basmati rice is very, very popular in India as well as the Indian subcontinents. So, India is the second largest producer of the rice after the China. Now, the basmati rice is the highest premium rice because of its long grain rice, and it has aroma of its own, enhance its flavor it's mixed with, right? So what happened in 1987, an American company, Rice Tech Incorporation, was granted a patent by the US Patent Office to call the aromatic rice grown outside India as basmati. So they have used the name basmati, and they have tried to patent this particular type of name so that the other people could not be able to use that. So Rice Tech Corporation had been trying to enter the international basmati markets with the brands like Kasmati and the Texmati, described as the basmati type rice with a minimal success. The Council of CSR again challenged the rice patent, and the Indian government, a strong advocate of geographical indications for the food products, claimed victory when the USTO limited the number of claims granted to the rice tag, which means they did not allow the rice tag to use the term basmati for these varieties, and that's how they have actually been upheld the patents. So this is a just just a way to explain you what is mean by the biopiracy and how it can be exploited to steal the traditional knowledge as well as the genetic resources of a developing country, so that that can be used for the exploitation for the to develop the different types of products, and that's how they can be able to use that to make the money out of that, and they will not be ready to share that money with the people who have actually given you this knowledge. So in conclusions, what we have discussed so far, we have discussed two aspects. One, we have discussed about the dangers or the ethical aspects, like where you actually have to consider the ethical concern, because biotechnology is a very powerful tool. So it operates at the molecular level, which means it actually has the capacity to change the particular species. You can actually make the monkey to something else if you are actually going to a certain extent. So many applications of it meant to solve global issues in the medicines, food, and environment. However, no matter how beneficial it seems, it does come with the drawbacks, like modifications brought to living organisms are giving strong ethical considerations, regardless of where and how the technical technology is applied. So it has a very powerful tool, right? So my biotechnology is, because it operates at a molecular level, and it actually has the capacity to solve the many types of problems, whether it is related to a medicine, food, or environment. But apart from these benefits, it also comes with the drawbacks, because the modifications could be very drastic. It could actually bring a lot of challenges in future, which are unknown to the human being as well. So that's how the ethical concern comes, and that's how the ethical issues comes, that whether you are allowed to disturb the natural environment and natural balance with this particular type of modifications. So, and apart from that, we also discuss about the biopiracy. So, biopiracy may or may not affect the biodiversity, but it certainly hurt the chances of sharing in a fair and in equitable sharing of the benefits of using a natural product, which means biopiracy is actually victimizing the people who have actually developed the knowledge, and the people who are actually utilizing that knowledge. So that is actually a major concern. So at the community level, to document the traditional knowledge of the plant product has been benefits. This may include the traditional consumer protection against the false claim about the so-called new product processes and the uses. So ultimately what we can say is that the biotechnology and its application should be done for the human service, but considering several ethical aspects, including the biopiracy, so that it should benefit the human being, but without causing a serious damage to the environment as well as the human health. With this, I would like to conclude my lecture here. Thank you.